Joining the dispatch today is esports commentator and Halo esports expert Harry Wonderboy Channon. Wonderboy, it's great to have you on. How are things going?
Oh, things are going great. Obviously, very, very excited with the recent announcements in the CDL, and honestly, just enjoying this off season.
Yeah, absolutely right. There's a lot to kind of dive into, and it's great to have you on, especially in times like this, because there's a lot to talk about right now with this guy, Shotzzy, right? Maybe not the most well-known player in terms of Call of Duty, but someone who's clearly made an impact when it comes down to the Halo community. And speaking of that, what was kind of the Halo community's reaction to Shotzzy joining Dallas?
I think the primary reaction, really, from everyone in the Halo community, seeing him join that roster already announced with Clayster on the roster, it was just pure excitement, purely because everyone coming from the Halo community knows the ceiling and the upside that comes with Shotzzy playing any kind of console video game. I mean, we've seen it in Halo, obviously in tournaments. We've seen him play Fortnite even on his stream, and even mechanically on a controller in Fortnite. He was doing crazy things at the time, which were just way ahead of its time. So I think anyone that's really been keeping tabs on Shotzzy, either from the Call of Duty scene while he was playing last season when he couldn't compete, or anyone coming from the Halo community, knows how exciting and the upside that Shotzzy really brings to any kind of Call of Duty roster.
Now, how long has Shotzzy been on the radar? Because was he someone who was kind of pretty much just caught the scene by storm in Halo, or was it something that's kind of been known for a while, or did he just pretty much come on the scene and instantly become one of those guys?
So the way Shotzzy kind of sprung onto the scene, he really grabbed headlines in Halo 2 Anniversary, which was around like 2014, 2015. He and another Halo player, Falcated, were on everyone's radar due to the fact that in 2 versus 2 gameplay, those guys were undefeated for the majority of Halo 2 Anniversary. Those guys could not be beaten in H2A. They were playing money matches. They were winning every single time, apart from one time against Spot and the Dog and a little known player called Ninja. You might have heard of him. But yeah, those guys absolutely steamrolled everyone on Halo 2 Anniversary. And that was when everyone sort of turned their heads and were like, okay, this guy has something about him. And then Halo 5 comes along. At that time, Shotzzy is just 15 years old. And it was kind of strange in the Halo 5 season because due to legal reasons and the age limits and stuff at tournaments, Shotzzy couldn't compete. He had the same problem that he had last season with COD, where he, wasn't of age to compete, and due to circumstances out of his control, obviously his age, he couldn't compete. So it got to the point where people were like, man, this guy really should be competing, and the HCS, the Halo Championship Series, who were running the tournaments, I don't want to say made an exception, but the rules were changed, and all of a sudden Shotzzy sprung onto the scene and had near instant success at tournaments. I mean, he won his first Halo tournament just a month after, I mean, less than a month after he turned 16 years old, which is just, when you think about all the history and how old of a game Halo is. Yes, of course, we have new titles and iterations coming out every year, but some of the players he was playing against when he beat his adversaries at his first tournament and won his first crown, they had been playing Halo for 10 plus years at that point. And for him to just be, barely 16 years old and win his first title is just absolutely unprecedented. So yeah, Shotzzy's been on the radar for a little while. Obviously has gone on and won a Halo World Championship since then as well. But yes, he's certainly someone that had an almost meteoric rise, I suppose, through the Halo scene.
Now, many people from the COD scene, when they look at Shotzi's line of work, pretty much it kind of starts and ends with the fact that, okay, he's a Halo World Champion. Now, of course, that's a massive achievement and obviously the biggest one, but they don't really know that he has won a total of 5 major championships. I think that's something that kind of goes under the radar a little bit. People look at, like I said, his kind of line of work and they say, oh, a championship, a world championship, that's great. But he really has been a consistent player, obviously throughout his start and kind of rise throughout his scene or throughout his time. 5 major championships, that's not something that, you just look at and say, oh, that's pretty decent. That's pretty good, right?
Yeah, five championships, like we said, on a game like Halo that has a heritage of players who've been playing for so long is certainly no mean feat. But I think the most impressive thing about that is his work regimen when it comes to the way he completely changed the landscape. I'm not going to pin this on himself, but the way that he got his team to practice throughout the Halo World Championship run that they went on. Halo's played in a 4 versus 4 format. Splice, when they won their first Halo World Championship, they were just exclusively playing 2 versus 2 games. They were just playing 2 versus 2s between each other. So no other team, when they were, had the chance to see what Splice's tactics were, and they essentially just put the buddy system into effect and were just playing 2 versus 2s. And it goes back again to his heritage, how he stood out, how he first got noticed in Halo, back in Halo 2 Anniversary when he was playing 2 versus 2s. He implements that same regimen every single day, 2 versus 2s, just grind against each other, and obviously it's worked.
Yeah. And now when that Splice team was kind of on their run, just in reference to them, what role was kind of Shotzzy filling with that team? And rather, do you think any of those characteristics will transfer over to a game like Call of Duty?
I think, especially when you look at the roster that Shotzy's found himself on, it's kind of hard for him to take positive, excuse me, how am I trying to word this? I think when you look at the roster that he's landed on, it's chalk and cheese. It's kind of different rosters, because when you look at the Splice Halo roster that he was on, he almost had to take, I don't want to say like a leader mantle in that one, but he certainly had a lot more pressure on himself to perform on that roster than I feel like he does in Dallas right now, because you have Clayster, you have Hoot next to him as well. You have some great players on that roster. I feel like the pressure almost is off him, and he can start to be a little bit more explosive. He's a very explosive player. I feel like when he has the freedom to create tactics, he's a great tactician as well. Some of the things that we saw in Splice Halo, when, again, just look at their practice when they were just playing 2 versus 2s instead of 4 versus 4. I feel like, again, that's that wild card kind of thing that you're going to get out of Shotzzy. That how am I trying to say this? That indescribable quantity, like it's unquantifiable what he brings to a roster, really.
Sure. Now, I know that it's very early, and this is Call of Duty, of course, but in your eyes, from what you know about him, where do you see Shotzzy performing in his rookie year? And from what you've seen, do you think the Rookie of the Year conversation is an accurate statement about him?
I think anyone that's seen him perform in Halo and how quickly he adapted to competing in that kind of competition certainly is almost, putting that title, he's putting that medal around his shoulders already, saying that, yeah, Shotzzy is a shoo-in for Rookie of the Year, because not only does he have the skills to back it up, he's probably the most high-profile rookie on any CDL roster as well. I mean, there's so much pressure that comes to playing under great players, alongside great players, and he is certainly one alongside Illy, is it, on Dallas? Those two are going to have masses of pressure on their shoulders because of the names and the titles that the players around them have won. So he certainly has it in him. I think he's almost a shoo-in for Rookie of the Year. It's just about whether or not the pressure gets to him. And what I've seen from him in big Halo tournaments previously, the pressure just doesn't seem to faze him very much.
Yeah. Now, in terms of a comparison, the most recent player to Shotzzy is Frosty, right? Both exceptional players, both world champions, and players that join Call of Duty 1 year apart from one another. And this has obviously happened with Hook as well. When he came back to Call of Duty, it took some time for him and for these guys to adjust, right? At the start of World War II, when Hook returned, it took a few months for him to kind of get back to that same level he was at back in Advanced Warfare. When Frosty joined Call of Duty in Black Ops 4, it took, the first few events for things to kind of change up a little bit. It was only until the end of Black Ops 4 was he really kind of meeting more of his peak, I would assume, and most likely his standards. Why do you think that is exactly? Why do you think there is kind of a transition period that maybe allows for players to have to work on their timing and have to work on the ability to translate over to COD? And do you think that Shotzzy will have that same thing? Or obviously, as you discussed, it's a matter of this guy, he has the ability to adapt. Do you think he'll suffer the same kind of issues that guys like Hook and more specifically Frosty have?
It's an interesting question. And I'm not really too sure how to answer it, because there's that part of me that has seen Shotzzy perform on Halo and has seen him grinding Call of Duty in the background and has seen him develop these new strategies, even in Black Ops. that just says that he's just going to light the entire league on fire. But then there's also that kind of part of me that knows history tends to repeat itself sometimes. Like you said, with Frosty and Hook, those guys took a long time to readjust or even adjust in Frosty's kind of situation. It's an interesting question. I feel like Shotzzy more than anyone, just purely because of his mechanical ability, probably won't have as long of a period. I will say he probably will struggle because it's his first time really playing at the highest level of COD, and you guys know, you guys have been watching COD forever. There is such a difference between kind of that amateur level and the pro level, and he's kind of been thrown in the deep end here. He wasn't able to compete last year. It could be a bit of a culture shock for him, but again, after what I've seen from him in Halo, I mean, this guy was willing to push mechanical boundaries that players were almost scared to in Halo 5. In Halo 5, we had new abilities added to Halo. We had like thruster pack, sliding, ground pound, Spartan charge, sprinting. Sprinting has been in Halo before, but Shotzzy was one of those players that was willing to push the boundaries and really, really exercise the limits mechanically of what you could do with your player model in the game. Meanwhile, almost everyone else, I'd say Frosty's probably the nearest comparison. Everyone else was kind of a little bit lackluster, and I feel like Frosty and Shotzzy are two players mechanically that, you know, once they get comfortable in their situation, however long it takes Shotzzy to get comfortable in Dallas, I feel like it's full steam ahead for Shotzzy after that.
Sure. Let's talk about Dallas on paper a little bit, right? Do you like the group that he has around them? We talked with the veterans of Clayster and Crimsix, and obviously kind of the newer school guys in Hook and Illy. Do you think that this roster is good for someone like Shotzzy?
I think it's the perfect situation. I mean, just looking at the DNA and the complexion of this team, he obviously knows Hook from the Halo days, so he has a familiar face. He has Crimsix, Clayster, two guys who have been around the block. He has Illy, who is, I'm pretty sure, is a search and destroy star, right? Like, he has that kind of ingenious mind next to him to kind of come up with these strategies and try and push the boundaries of what's possible and what's viable in a competitive setting in Modern Warfare. So I honestly think this is probably the best roster he could have found himself on when you look at CDL almost as a fresh start for a lot of these teams, right? I feel like it's probably the best one he could have landed on.
Now, in terms of all time, players that have transitioned from Halo to COD, who's the best to ever do it?
That's a question. I mean, it's hard to look past the OGs, like you have Enable and Formal. Those guys, championship winners. I feel like I'm not sure if we can count Hook because obviously he was great in COD before he was forced over to Halo because of the age limit thing. I feel like you discount Hook because of that, because he's a COD player. You know, he's out of the question. For me, if you're making me pick one, probably is going to be Formal, even though Enable's been winning a little bit more lately. But I feel like Shotzzy is certainly, if he does hit the ground running in the CDL, has definitely the chance within 3 years to be in that conversation for sure.
I like that. Now, one last question. If you could choose one player from at any point throughout Call of Duty history to go over and play Halo, who's going to be that guy?
See, I could put Crimsix on blast about when he used to play Halo Reach,
right?
And it wasn't doing so well. That's a tough one. That's a tough one. I wasn't prepared for this question.
Had to throw a few curveballs in, you know.
Yeah. I think Scump. I feel like Scump would be a good player to come over to play Halo. I feel like he's one of those players. I love someone who will get loud and get the crowd involved. You know, not only would he come over with this massive fan base that he has, but also the raw passion that he brings. Someone like him or Clayster, I feel like it's probably going to be for the best.
Yeah, that's Harry, Wonderboy Channon, esports commentator and Halo expert.
Thanks, guys.